Top 9 version of the Scotch trap. Number 1. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, e takes d4, knight g5, h6, knight takes f7, king takes f7, bishop c for check, king e8, queen h5 check, g6, queen takes g6 check, king e7, queen f7 check, king d6, e5 check, king c5, queen d5 check, king b4, queen d5 checkmate. Number 2. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, e takes d4, bishop c4, knight a5, bishop takes f7 check, king takes f7, knight e5 check, king e6, queen takes d4, knight c6, queen d5 check, king f6, queen f7 check, king takes e5, bishop f for check, king takes e4, knight c3 check, king d4, queen d5 checkmate. Number 3. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, e takes d4, bishop c4, bishop c5, white castle, d6, knight g5, knight e5, bishop b3, h6, queen h5, queen f6, f4, d3, discover check, king h1, g6, queen d1, pawn takes g5, f takes e5, rook takes h to check, king takes, queen h8 check, king g3, queen h for check, king f3, queen g for checkmate. Number 4. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, e takes d4, knight takes d4, knight e7, knight c3, g6, bishop g5, bishop g7, knight d5, bishop takes d4, queen takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop c4, black castle, knight f6 check, king h8, knight g4, d6, bishop f6 check, king g8, knight h6 checkmate. Number 5. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, e takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop e7, bishop c4, knight f6, white castle, knight takes d4, queen takes d4, d6, f4, b6, e5, d5, bishop e5 check, bishop d7, e takes f6, bishop c5, rook e1 check, king f8, f takes g7 check, king g8, g takes h8 checkmate. Number 6. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, e takes d4, knight takes d4, queen h4, knight b5, bishop c5, queen f3, knight f6, knight takes c7 check, king d8, knight takes a8, rook e8, bishop d3, knight takes e4, white castle, knight takes f2, rook takes f2, rook e1 check, bishop f1, knight d4, queen takes f7, knight e2 check, king h1 forced, rook takes f1 check, rook takes f1, knight g3 checkmate. Number 7. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, e takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop c5, c3, Knight f6, bishop g5. Black castle. Bishop c4. Queen e7. White castle. Queen takes e4, bishop takes f6. G takes f6. Bishop d3. Queen h4. Knight f5. Queen g5. h4. Queen f4. g3. Queen e5. Queen g for check. King h8. Queen g7 checkmate. Number 8. e4. e5. Knight f3. Knight c6. d4. E takes d4. Knight takes. Knight f6. Bishop g5. Bishop e7. Knight f5. d5. E takes d5. Knight e5. Knight takes e7. Queen takes. Bishop takes f6. Knight f3 checkmate. Number 9. e4. e5. Knight f3. Knight c6. d4. E takes d4. Knight takes. Knight f6. Knight c3. Bishop b4. Knight takes c6. D takes c6. Bishop d3. Black castle. White castle. d5. e5. Knight g4. f4. Queen h4. h3. Bishop c5 check. King h1. Queen g3. Pawn takes g4. Queen h for checkmate.